Checker Motors was created with the merger of three companies starting in 1922 under Morris Markin. The first being Commonwealth Motors, a company that started with cycle cars as Parton Palmer in 1913 and quickly moved to luxury cars with the name change in 1917. The second being Markin or Mogul Auto Body, a company that converted Commonwealth cars into Mogul taxicabs. And the third being the Checker Cab Company, the nation's second largest taxi service, coming in just behind the Yellow Cab Company. The purchase of Checker Cab happened slowly over many years starting in 1924, with full control not being completed until 1937. Their first car, the Checker C44, was little changed from the Mogul cab it replaced, and was called Checker for the company it was built for rather than built by. For 1923, the cars were downsized, with the four-cylinder being reduced from 40 horsepower to 23, and the wheelbase reduced from 127 inches to 117, and production moved from Joliet, Illinois to Kalamazoo, Michigan. Regular updates meant the model changed almost annually to H, E, F, and G. The car would get bigger again with the Model G of 1927 and offered an optional six-cylinder with 27 horsepower. Then the first major redesign would come with the Model K of 1928, and the 6 would be the only engine. But competition among taxi services in Chicago was getting more and more violent through the 1920s, and Morris Markin's house was even firebombed. So to resolve the issue, he bought out the Yellow Cab and Parmalee Cab Companies to become the primary cab company in the U.S., although he passed on taking over Yellow Cab's own manufacturing, which was then sold to General Motors to become the Terminal Taxicab, which focused on contracts with train stations, and would ultimately lead to a taxi war in New York in the early 1930s. This time, it was resolved by the city creating the Taxi Commission and regulating the services. But by 1932, Checker was struggling, both financially and with internal conflicts, and ended up being sold to Cord. And in 1933, it started building the Auburn Safety Cab, also known as the Checker Model T. In 1935, they introduced the more stylish Model Y that would expand the lineup to include 6- and 8-door versions, or depot hacks, a sort of minibus or shuttle. The Model Y used Auburn's 148 horsepower Lycoming Straight 8, but A.C.D.C. closed its doors after 1936, and Markin bought Checker back, and a Continental 6-cylinder would return as the base engine. The Model A arrived for 1940 with very distinct styling. It was said to reduce the chance of tire and wheel damage in a minor accident, allowing the car to continue when others couldn't. The manual transmission would be moved to the column for the first time, and the car became known as the Art Deco Checker, and it is believed there's only one left in existence. It was available with rear sunroof and a retractable landaulet top, both features Checker patented on the previous model, as well as its 15-position adjustable driver's seat introduced in 1931. During the Second World War, Checker was one of many manufacturers to produce the 1-ton Ben-Hur military trailers, but unlike other manufacturers, Checker didn't save its pre-war body tooling to restart where it left off. It had to start with fresh styling on the existing drivetrain. The updates to the A2 just brought the styling up to where the rest of the industry had been before the war. The A2 through A7 were variations of the same car to meet different taxi requirements, from different wheelbases to seating configurations to having a functional trunk, something disallowed on Prohibition taxis. The exception was the A3, still the same basic car, but with deluxe trim and marketed as a pleasure vehicle that sort of tested the waters of a non-commercial version. The side-valve 6-cylinder engines were still provided by Continental and were similar to those used by the post-war wonder Kaiser Frazer. The styling was updated in 1956 to its last and most iconic form as the A8. It still used the same Continental-provided 6, but now overhead valve was an option, as was a Borg-Warner Driver-Matic Special 3-speed automatic. The A9 of 1958 got an updated front end with quad headlights, and for 1959, the first civilian checker was offered as the A10 Superba. It was available as a sedan and a wagon, and came in 2 trim levels, Standard and Special, although in 1961, the Special became the Marathon. For 1962, a long wheelbase town custom limousine was added, but it only lasted until 1965, and after 1963, all checkers were called Marathons. Throughout the 60s, Checker would sell between 6,000 and 8,000 cars a year, its highest volume period, civilian versions being sold through a very limited dealer network. In 1964, an antitrust suit was filed against Checker as a taxi company and a manufacturer, a suit that forced Checker to allow its drivers to buy from other manufacturers. As a result, Checker began to sell off its taxi licenses. In 1965, Checker switched to Chevrolet engines and transmissions, a base 230 straight 6, or an optional 283 or 327 V8. The 283 was only used for 2 years, a 307 was offered for 1969 only, and also in 1969, the 327 transitioned to a 350. Morris Markin died in 1970, and his son David took over the company. The following year, the 6 was bumped up to 250 cubic inches. Checker's answer to the 1973 Big Bumper Law was quite literally just a big bumper, which made the outdated design look even more outdated. Not surprisingly, the Big 3 were steadily taking more and more of the market, while Checker relied on GM for updated engines and added a 305 cubic inch 5-liter V8 for 1977. Obviously, something new was going to be needed. When former GM president Ed Cole invested in Checker and started working on a plan for a new Checker cab based on an extended Volkswagen Golf, but the deal fell apart when he crashed his private plane and died. 1980 saw a number of engine changes. The straight 6 was replaced by a 3.8-liter 229 cubic inch V6, and a 4.4-liter 267 cubic inch V8 was added, and the only 350 available was the diesel. But there was also another attempt at creating a replacement car, this time a car based on the GM X-Body, which was tested by creating an extended version of the Chevy Citation. But once again, the deal fell through. It wouldn't be the last attempt at an economical purpose-built taxi, but it would be Checker's last attempt. With production down to about 2,000 cars a year, 1982 would be its last year, and American taxi companies would be left using traditional full-size sedans for the foreseeable future. Checker's exact production numbers are unknown for much of the company's history, but it is estimated that only about 250,000 cars were produced over the company's 60 years. But the cars were built to be durable, often being referred to as tanks, meaning they saw many years of service in the public eye, making it seem like there were many more of them than there actually were. Today, there may not be much more than 1,000 remaining on the road, which would explain why they've become a collector's item. That, and their decades as an American cultural icon. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.